Well, let's begin our news review. This morning I'm joined by editor-at-large of the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and the global affairs correspondent at the paper, Molly Blackall. Great to have you with us this Sunday. Thank you for joining us. Shall we kick off with the front page, Charlotte, of The Observer? Desperation for some over weight loss jabs, in particular the price of Mounjaro, is pushing people into the black market, essentially, is this story.
Yeah, so from tomorrow, Mounjaro is going to go up by 170%, and The Observer's dedicated several pages to this, as well as the front page. What's happening is that people are going onto TikTok, going online, buying dodgy jabs off the black market, particularly a new drug called Retatrutide. They're always hard to say, aren't they? And that is still in clinical trials, but somehow people are able to get hold of it online. So obviously the Observer's warning, don't buy stuff that hasn't finished its clinical trial online. But it reminds me of the old adage about drug dealers, which is get people hooked on something and then put the price up, and then they go, by any means necessary, they'll carry on buying it. It's really depressing that that's the case for something like this. But story after story you read in papers is people, when they come off weight loss drugs, they put the weight back on. So they become sort of dependent on them, even though they're not really addictive. And so people are desperate because the prices are rising and they're in shorter and shorter supply, and people have become reliant on these things.
It's interesting, isn't it? Regulation on online platforms essentially isn't there when people go online, Molly, and buy drugs that don't have the right checks in place.
Totally. I mean, we've seen this with so many products where you get something that looks the same as the original, but it's basically a counterfeit, whether that's makeup or other kind of toiletries. But I think, as you say, it's kind of particularly miserable, really, that they're tapping into people who are trying to lose weight, trying to become more healthy. We know that we've got an obesity crisis within the UK. I think it's 64% roughly of UK adults who are either overweight or obese. It's keeping people off work. It's putting a lot of pressure on the NHS, and it's making people deeply unhappy. And to see people kind of exploiting that, for financial gain, I think is really quite sour.
Yeah, I've seen so many people who've, admitted openly that they're using these weight loss jabs, particularly in the run-up to summer holidays. And I found myself, do I need to take some kind of weight loss jab or buy? It was, and that was just from talking to friends. So when that sort of unregulated advertising online, that's where it's a real worry.
Well, especially for young people. So, do you remember that phrase, no carbs before marbs? That was the original iteration. Young people are now going on TikTok being like, well, I've got Marbella, I've got my summer holiday coming up, quick jab, does anyone know where I can get a quick jab? And I did a piece, it's now 2 years ago, before everyone knew a lot about Ozempic. I did do that, I'm afraid to say, and I did a mea culpa on television and wrote a big piece in the Mail Online because at the time we didn't really know much about it, but people I knew were saying, look, there's this new thing, have a quick jab in April, by the summer you'll look beach body ready. And I have to say, do not do it. I feel so embarrassed. I can't really believe I'm admitting it, but it is something people do. I would never do it again. And it's especially something young people are doing by buying this stuff on TikTok, because we all know these crazy trends, they really go wild on TikTok. And not everyone's as old and wise as I am.
I think there's huge normalisation of it, as you say, not only on social media, but I think everybody knows somebody who's taking it. I mean, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, said in an interview recently that half of his colleagues are taking it. He said it's the talk of the House of Commons tea room. I mean, when you get the Health Sec saying, oh, everyone I know is on it, it really has reached an incredibly kind of widespread audience at that point.
Yeah. When I did do a search for how much it cost, though, I was like, not for me. I'm going to pass on that.
And only
hence why people are buying it online for cheap.
OK, really interesting on that one. Let's go to the Sunday Express, Molly. Most Britons would refuse to fight for country. This is their big story that they're leading on this Sunday. Yeah,
so it's a poll that they, or a study that they have gotten hold of, which suggests that 2 out of 3 adults wouldn't fight for the UK if the homeland was attacked, if you will. And I think many people will find this alarming, particularly people sitting in the Ministry of Defence today, not least because we have war in Europe for the first time in a very long time. We've got kind of rising geopolitical threats across the board. But it's not the first time that this issue has come up. There was a kind of a national national conversation almost around it last year when the outgoing Chief of the General Staff in the Army said that the UK might need to look at some sort of kind of citizen army. And that got people very terrified that conscription was looming, which I'm assured it's not.
Yeah, it's all based on volunteering at the moment, isn't it?
Exactly.
Because obviously in anything like this, war, it all depends on morale. And if you force people into that type of thing, it doesn't tend to end very well.
For sure. And I mean, in certain situations, you know, recently we have seen it being used, for instance, in Ukraine. It got brought in during that invasion. All men, you know, aged between 18 and I think around 60 had to stay and had to, you know, or were encouraged to or had to join up and fight. And so in certain times it is a tool that the UK could use, but isn't planning to. But I mean, the UK has had huge problems with recruitment, even to the sort of conventional armed forces, not talking about any kind of conscription. It's basically fallen under its recruitment target pretty much every year since 2010. So I think this certainly won't help. And there is precedent for something like a kind of conscription model, you know, within Europe in countries which aren't at war, you know, Estonia, Lithuania. So it's certainly a conversation which is ongoing, and it did make the Conservative manifesto pledge, you know, last year. But I think, yeah, it's an interesting kind of detachment, I think, that people have. You know, the sort of most people living in the UK now have thankfully grown up not under the shadow of war. You know, most people haven't experienced what that feels like, and we should all be very grateful for that. But I do wonder if it's created a sort of detachment, you know, from this concept, and it feels quite alien and clearly quite unwanted.
OK, we'll leave that Express story there for now. I wanted to move on to the front page of the Daily Mail. Rayner used top wealth protection firm in deal over house. This is reports from a few of the newspapers about controversy over Angela Rayner and her tax arrangements in relation to houses that she has.
Yeah, well, it's a great story by Glenn Owen. So there's a company called Shoesmiths based in Birmingham, and back in 2023, it seems Rayner consulted Shoesmiths. This was around the time she put her house in a trust for her children, or a lot of the equity of her house in a trust for her children. And although that's the most recent case, this isn't relevant to the most recent case, which is her, you know, capital gains tax on her Hove house. What this shows is, you know, she can't really claim any of this as an accident, because clearly she's been consulting and she's probably properly arranging her financial dealings with her 3 homes. And while she very much will maintain that none of this is in any way illegal or outside of the law, it does feel hypocritical. She is the housing minister, and, you know, Shoesmith sort of specialises in getting people to pay less tax or finding their way around how much tax they pay.
Yeah, it's just worth saying that a spokesperson for the Home Office is saying, from a spokesperson for Miss Rayner, are saying, look, she hasn't done anything wrong. There's no basis for any of these claims. But I wonder, Molly, your take on this, whether a couple of these stories from the papers, what your take is on how they're approaching someone, if you just look on the face of it, whatever your politics are, as a single mum at 16 that's risen the ranks of politics in that bubble in Westminster, and whether this, considering they say she hasn't done anything wrong, is fair game?
I think lots of her allies would say, well, lots of people consult financial advisors or, you know, something like that, and it's not uncommon. And of course, you know, what she's stressed is that what she's done is not at all illegal. And Labour are very much trying to draw a line under that and say, you know, as far as we're concerned, that's it done. I think the worry is the kind of optics, particularly after we've recently had the homelessness minister have to resign because she put up she got rid of her tenants and then put up the rent by 700 quid a month, which again wasn't illegal, but raised some real questions around hypocrisy and actually would have been outlawed under Labour's own incoming policy. So I think the effect of these kind of stories is cumulative, and it can sort of damage the way that people perceive politicians, even if nothing has been done wrong. And again, she would stress she's probably doing what lots of other people do.
Yeah, optics, I suppose, are not great at this time. Shall we end on, it's in the Daily Mail today, and it's some details about the King's Garden.
I love
about
this
20
story.
seconds, though.
OK, I'll be really quick. There's a beautiful, stunning rose garden in Windsor Castle. You can see it from Heathrow as you come into land.
Oh, wow.
And what he's trying to do is spruce it up, because he wants it to be a giant advert for Windsor, so that people, when they land, think, oh, do you know, I'm going to go and visit Windsor Castle.
Thank you very much.